affairs, who rules with wisdom at your side, we who are earthbound give you our thanks for the bounty of the seas, the lands, and the hands that feed us today. We thank you also for this day, and may this day be a blessing for each and every one who lives and moves and has their being within our county and all of its communities. We also ask that we may always be a blessing to you in every thought that we hold, every action that we take, and every word that we utter. It is this that we pray in that name which is above all other names. Amen.
We would like to thank our hosts, the Eagles, number 3392, for the fine meal this morning. We can give them a hand. We will get on to our program. One time.
The Gladwin County Control and Water Conservation District now has access. We have a shared outreach forester for private small landowners, shared between Gladwin and Blair counties, and we'll be having a program on January 22nd, 6:30 in the library on some reforesting and what services that our outreach forest will be offering. 6:30 at the Gladwin County Library. Private land.
And just to remind everyone, we've been working on our website, the Gladwin County Chamber's website, and if you want to put events on that, I believe there's a link on the website that you can go in and submit those, and we'll get them on our calendar. So please utilize that. We've worked very hard. We've already Stout from Chemical Bank on our board and has done a lot of work on that. So we're happy to see it utilized. If there's no other announcements, we'll get on to our program. Please give a big Gladwin County welcome to our state senator from the 36th district, good friend serving us so well in Lansing, the Honorable John Moolenaar.
Well, thank you and good morning. It's great to see everybody out today. When we were riding up, we were listening to the radio and talking about the Gladwin schools being closed, and I kind of wondered if I'd get here and there'd be a sign on the door. We are meeting today. But it's, I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and this is something I always look forward to. It's always a very good discussion, and it's always something that I appreciate seeing the new leadership classes. You've done a fantastic job with the program, leadership program. I can remember years ago with the inception of the program, and I don't know how many graduates have gone through the program. Does anybody know that?
Over 60, 65.
That's fantastic. But what a wonderful community to have people stepping up that way, because I know it takes time and focus away from your jobs, your families, and other activities. And I appreciate the chance to be with Representative Joel Johnson, and I'm so glad he was reelected this last election. He is a great partner. I was talking to Joe Rowley earlier, and Joel really spearheaded Trooper Jeffrey Weirda Memorial Highway effort in the legislature, and just to see that honor and very meaningful. And I know people in this community and can certainly appreciate the commitment of our law enforcement and to be able to honor someone who serves so valiantly that way. And I know Joseph Rowley is very involved. And, Joel and I have worked on the updating the police headquarters. I'll tell you, seeing the before and after of that is just incredible. And congratulations. And it's a wonderful project, and really pleased to see that get done. We've worked on different issues in Michigan. We had a term last term. Some would say it was probably one of the busiest legislative sessions they've seen in years. A lot was done. I think people came in with the expectation that we wanted to try and change the direction of Michigan and move us in a better course. The way the process works is usually have the state of the state addressed by the governor. The governor outlines his priorities, and so that's coming up next Wednesday. So you'll see that for the new session Wednesday night. I think it's at 7 o'clock. And that's kind of the kickoff of the new legislative session. And if I had to say, kind of the things that we've been working on, there's so much. When you think of the election this last November, it was sort of a status quo election across the country, across the state, where things pretty much remained the same in terms of who's leading the country and the state. So what does that mean? Well, in Washington, D.C., right now we're seeing a lot having to do with the fiscal issues, the fiscal cliff. How is Washington going to resolve some of those issues, the spending, taxing, the significant $16.5 trillion debt. In Michigan, we face similar kinds of issues, but there are a few differences. One is, in Michigan, we have a balanced budget requirement. So whereas, in Washington, they continue to struggle with these ideas, and there's really not a pressure point that says, okay, you've got to get this done by this date, and if not, here are the consequences. We've seen some of that with the fiscal cliff, but we're going to see more and more of that with the debt limit discussions and budgeting issues. Why am I talking about that right now? Well, because if you think about it, so much of what we do in the state of Michigan, there's a certain amount of revenue that comes in from the federal government. But over the years, we've assumed, over the years, we've kind of made decisions to try and draw down more federal dollars. But we are in a very different world today than we have been in the past. And that is that federal debt, annual deficit, is going to have significant impacts on the state of Michigan. And so as a result, we need to be planning accordingly. So some of my comments today may have to do with the idea that we're going to continue to focus on our priorities in the state of Michigan, which are paying down our debt, being responsible fiscally, making sure we have a balanced budget. The last 2 years, we've been able to get our budget balanced really quite significantly before the deadline. We have an October 1st deadline. We've been able to do that before July 1st for the last 2 years, and we're going to continue working on that. Now, it's not always good news. I mean, I know there are people in the room who would like to see more spending on different priorities, but I know Joel feels the same way, as we feel we have an obligation to communicate with you straight up and in a timely way, so people who depend on funding from the state of Michigan know what they can count on as they're planning their budget. So I think you're going to see a continuation of that. February 7th, the governor presents his budget recommendation. So you have the state of the state, which kind of outlines the priorities statewide for the governor. February 7th is when the governor will present his budget. And then it pretty much shifts over to the legislature, which then will take up those issues and be working on what are the legislative proposals, recommendations, and how do we work together to an agreement at the end of the year. So that's kind of the time frame. In this last 2 years, we've really focused a lot on making Michigan's business climate more attractive for job growth. And some people have felt, I know, that we focus so much on that, it just seems like we're always talking about that. Well, why is that? Well, I think we can all appreciate that Michigan is the only state in the country that actually lost people in the last census over the last decade. And a lot of that is because people want to be here, but they can't find work here, or they just don't have opportunities here. So, the goal would be to try and turn that around and make Michigan attractive for jobs, attractive for people. And not only is that good for families, who don't have to leave, but it's also ironically good for the state budget, because one of the challenges, whether you're a school district or other areas, when we lose population, we lose taxpayers, we lose revenue. And schools get hit doubly because it increases revenues to the state, but it also, schools are penalized because if they lose students, they lose on a per student basis. So the goal over these last couple of years has been job growth, making Michigan more attractive for investments. So some of the things we've done, we eliminated the Michigan business tax, and we replaced replaced it with a flat corporate profits tax, and we're trying to eliminate as many of the loopholes, special exemptions in the tax code as possible. Now, they're trying to do that at the federal level, and quite frankly, we've got a very good congressman who's at the forefront of that. But I'll tell you, that's going to be a challenging thing at the federal level, because you have everyone who has a certain exemption who's fighting to keep that. But in the state, we were able to change a lot of that, and as a result, our tax climate is considerably more favorable for investment. Another thing we've worked on is the personal property tax elimination, and this is really a penalty on investment in Michigan. Now, one of the challenges with that is local governments in different areas of our communities are affected by that, and so we've tried to, as much as possible, protect funding up to 80% of that, and, through different ways of closing loopholes and allowing communities local options. But that is something that I've heard concern about in terms of what's the impact of the local community. But I think we've really worked hard to try and minimize the impact of that. But again, the focus is on growth, because if Michigan doesn't grow jobs, we will continue in a spiral. Those are some of the issues. On a personal level, I've had a chance to serve on the Appropriations Committee, which is the spending budgetary committees. We spend in Michigan, it's a budget of about $48 billion. I chair the community health budget, which is a $15 billion budget. Much of that is Medicaid. Only $2 billion of that, $2 billion is general fund dollars. But there are some pretty significant decisions we're going to have to make in that area. All of us know about the cost of health care. We're aware of the Affordable Care Act that was passed at the federal level, and questions of how states are going to be responding to that. I can tell you, one of the things I'm very concerned about is, and this takes us back to the earlier comments about the federal government. Right now, there's this question of, do we expand Medicaid coverage in Michigan, and to what extent? You go up to 133%, I think, of the poverty level to expand it. And the federal government's really trying to encourage that. Well, I have to tell you, when I first came to the State House, 2002, 1 in 8 Michigan residents was on Medicaid. Now it's more like 1 in 5. And if we continue to go in the direction of expanding Medicaid, which is what the federal government would like us to do, what they do is they offer money kind of up front, federal dollars. And then over time, they peel back their commitment, and then the states have more responsibility. And when you're looking at budget holes on a year-to-year basis, it's very tempting to say, if we spend a little bit more here, we can draw down this much more federal funding. But at some point, you have to ask the question, what can we sustain long term? How can we care for our residents the best way possible, but realize there are limits on what we can do and what the federal can do? So I think you're going to see that debate, and some of that will be in our subcommittee on how will Michigan respond to that. So some states have said we are not going to make expansions in Medicaid because we don't feel that we can sustain that in the long term. Other states are going to say we are going to expand it and draw down those federal dollars, and then we'll address that when we get to that point. So I think it'll be a very interesting discussion. But even if we expand Medicaid and more people are covered, that doesn't guarantee access to health care. And I know we've got some experts in health care. But one of the concerns I have, one of my priorities in our budget, is making sure we have the personnel to care for people, especially in the primary care. In some areas of our state, you have to go 2 hours to see an OB doctor. So if you imagine you're in an area of the state, you have to go 2 hours, that starts to really present some problems. And so one of the things we try to do is look at reimbursement rates for physicians, especially in some of these high-need areas. We're also looking at ways to make it more attractive for medical students to do residencies in Michigan, because if they start here, they're more likely to stay here. One of the biggest frustrations is when, our state, we spend a lot of money on training and position, and they leave to another state. And we put a significant investment there, and we lose out on that. So those will be some areas in our community health subcommittee. Just one last area, and then I'd like to open it up for questions. We're going to continue our focus on jobs, trying to help our economy grow, because that ultimately is going to have the best impact on our state. One special area I also chair the Military Veterans Affairs Committee. And, as you all know, we are going to have more and more veterans returning, whether it's from Afghanistan, a lot of Iraq veterans are back. One of the things we found out over the last year is that when it came to accessing the benefits to which they're entitled from the federal government, Michigan is pretty much at the bottom in terms of how our veterans are accessing that information and those benefits. And there's a variety of reasons, but a couple of them are, one is that we were not a certified VA state so that we could access databases with the feds to find out who are veterans in our state and how we can serve them. So we're kind of in the dark on that. Well, what you're going to hear in the next few weeks is that Michigan now has received that, so we will be able to better identify who are veterans who move into our state and who may qualify for benefits, and who may actually be receiving state benefits when they could be receiving veterans benefits. And then secondly, it's a matter of kind of streamlining, how in state government we relate to our veterans and communicate, help them become aware of what benefits they have coming to them. I think it's a lot of confusion when someone comes out of the military and they're told too much of information right from the start, but then trying to remember things and then trying to figure out who they talk to about what. So I think in the governor's state of the state, you'll hear him talking about that, and that's something our committee will be working on to address that, because people who have served our country as in armed forces, we want to make sure we're really caring for them, and we want to make sure Michigan is attractive as possible to make sure families can make it here. So that kind of summarizes my formal speech, and with this, I'd like to open it up for any questions.